In a small and tranquil town on the outskirts of the city, there lay a long street that stretched amidst scattered fields and houses. At the end of this street stood an old, neglected house shrouded in mystery, inhabited by an eccentric man named Mr. Daniel. Daniel had lived alone for years, and no one knew much about him. Neighbors occasionally glimpsed him wandering around his house, but he rarely ventured out or spoke to anyone. A veil of enigma surrounded him, and local children were terrified of approaching his ominous abode, continually exchanging spine-chilling tales about him. When the Carson family moved into the house next to Daniel's, they were oblivious to his past or the neighbors' eerie stories. The family consisted of Jack the father, Sarah the mother, and their two children, Emily and Sam. Initially, their life was serene, but strange occurrences began to unfold over time. One night, while Sarah was looking out the kitchen window at a late hour, she noticed Mr. Daniel standing in his backyard staring directly at their house. She couldn't see his face clearly due to the darkness, but his figure was as immobile as a statue. A sense of dread washed over her, prompting her to swiftly close the curtains, trying to dismiss the unsettling sight. In the days that followed, the disturbances escalated. The family heard footsteps in the night, as if someone were wandering in their garden, but every time they went out to check, no one was there. Their children started talking about a tall, enigmatic man they saw outside their window at night. At first, Sarah thought these were merely figments of their imagination, but Daniel's peculiar behavior made her increasingly uneasy. Then the animals began vanishing from the neighborhood. The family's cat went missing, followed by several other pets from the nearby homes. The neighbors whispered about these mysterious disappearances, but had no evidence to point to the culprit. One day, while Jack was working in the backyard, he discovered something horrifying: strange bones buried near the fence that separated their house from Daniel's. These bones didn't belong to any familiar animal, prompting Jack to call the police immediately. The authorities arrived, but couldn't explain what they found. Meanwhile, Sarah was convinced that something more sinister was happening around Daniel's house. On a dark night, she decided to keep a close watch. From her window, she saw Daniel leave his house at a late hour, carrying a large bag and heading towards the nearby forest. Driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity, she followed him at a safe distance, her steps as light as the wind. When Daniel reached a secluded spot in the forest, Sarah hid behind a large tree and observed. Her shock was immense as she saw Daniel open the bag, revealing the mutilated body of an animal, which he then began to bury. But what terrified her even more were the shallow graves around him, some of which bore human remains,